The HSC exams are always being updated to stop students memorizing essays. However, there is a technique you can use to make sure you're prepared for any question. Good morning. Today I'm going to be sharing the technique that I used and that I teach to make sure that I was never caught off guard by an essay question. We can't really memorize essays these days, but this technique is as close as it's going to get. I'm going to go through how you can use the syllabus and practice questions to discover all the types of questions you could be asked, and then from there how to make a kind of choose your own adventure essay plan. I call this an essay scaffold. I'm going to use an example from the English Common Module Texts and Human Experiences, but this technique can apply in a bunch of situations and in different subjects. Firstly, understand what could be asked by using the syllabus and sample questions. This might be a weird analogy, but I like to explain the essay scaffold as a kind of defense against the exam, a defense against all the types of questions that could be thrown at you. If the essay scaffold is a defense, then the syllabus is as close as we're going to get to the enemy's plan of attack. Any question that your school or the trials or the HSC could ask you, all those questions have to be derived from the syllabus. So you want to make sure you're going through it with a fine-tooth comb. For example, if we have a look at my preparation for the common module, here we have the syllabus. Here I've pulled out all the important terms, and from there I've made notes on how to answer the question. So this includes what they could ask about, and they could ask about individual and or collective human experiences, the representation of human qualities, emotions, which is actually the part they decided to specify in my HSC back in 2019 when they did a question for the Crucible about love. Very interesting. Anyway, and then there were motivations, a specific character they could ask about. They could ask about animalities, paradoxes, and inconsistencies. How storytelling is used to reflect lives and cultures. They could ask about the form. So for example, the Crucible, it was a play format. And they could ask about a theme. So they could ask about these aspects either individually or any combination of these aspects. You can also inform your list of what could be asked by using sample questions and past papers. So my year was the first year to sit the new syllabus. We didn't really have many past papers, so they had some sample questions, but as time goes on, there'll be more to work with. These sample questions help me gather a couple things. So for example, I noted that the question could be specific to the text, unspecific to the text, or it could be a stimulus statement. The sample questions also showed that the question could be specific to a character, and that wasn't really made explicit in the syllabus. So you can definitely pull some interesting stuff out of those past papers and the sample questions. If you're struggling with pulling out all the types of things that could be asked from the syllabus and these questions, this is a part that you can definitely do with a teacher or a tutor. So once you have understood what could be asked and you have that list, you can move on. Step 2, prepare an adaptable thesis or a few theses. Gather your thoughts about the text, or maybe you have multiple texts. Just gather them into one general statement. Alternatively, you can have a less general statement and just have a couple different ones. So it's like, depending on the question, you could pick which of your 3 general statements works best. That worked really well for me in some subjects like Extension English and Visual Art. So here was my adaptable thesis for the common module. It read, storytelling invites us as audiences into particular lives and cultures, giving powerful and often critical insight into what it means to be human. Very general, I know, but it needs to be, and when you write yours, you want to make sure there is lots of room to wrap your thesis around the specifics of the question. Thirdly, prepare some key arguments. So there are 2 ways to kind of go about picking your key arguments. You can prepare maybe 2 or 3 arguments and have lots of different examples under them. So on the day, depending on the question, you keep the key arguments, you just have to specify which examples best suit the question. Alternatively, you can go down the route where you have more key arguments. So maybe you have 4 or 5 key arguments prepared, and in the exam you have to pick 2 or 3 of those arguments to zero in on. So instead of picking examples and keeping the arguments, you're picking main arguments and keeping the examples underneath. Basically, you just want to have room to pick and choose. In this topic, I had 2 arguments and I just had lots of examples under each of them, ready to specify on the day. And my 2 arguments were, firstly, the corruption of justice, and secondly, the rise of hysteria. So for each of these arguments that you pick, you want to write some very general theses, subtopic sentences. Under these, you can see all the different examples I had, which leads me to the next step. 4th, cover all your bases. So now you need to go back to that list you made of all the types of questions that could be asked and make sure that you have examples that cover every aspect of that list. Here you can see I had examples from all the main characters just to make sure I could answer if they gave me a specific character. I also made sure I had a range of emotions evident in these examples, just in case they asked me to single out an emotion. And I had not just dialogue quotes, but I also had quotes from the stage directions and Arthur Miller's interspersed essays. And the reason I had that range of quotes is because if they asked me to write about the play formats, I would need to reference the stylistic decisions he made. You want to look at that list you made of anything that could be asked and make sure you have examples that cover everything, but don't go overboard. You want to make sure that this list is a reasonable length so you actually do have a good chance at becoming very familiar, not memorizing, but becoming quite familiar with it. 5th, fill out what you can memorize. I hope no teachers watch this, but it's fine. No, I think teachers would agree. There are definitely parts of an essay that you can memorize, and they include your best analysis for each quote, and you just memorize that analysis, that sentence of analysis that pulls apart the quote, because that analysis is adaptable to the point you're going to argue. So you can memorize the analysis, get it done, make sure it's perfect, and put it in your head. You can also memorize the part where you introduce your texts, for example, Arthur Miller's allegorical play, The Crucible. And if you have any parts where you explain context, you can also memorize those. You can also memorize the structure parts of the essay. So the introduction, the sub-theses or the topic sentences, and your conclusion. But those parts really do need to be adapted to the essay question. 6th and finally, improve. Once the essay scaffold is created, practice applying it to all different kinds of questions. So when I finish the essay scaffold, and also what I encourage my students to do, is put that scaffold on your laptop just next to you, have the essay question there and your pen ready to write. And as you write, be looking at that scaffold. So using it, adapting as you go, scrolling through, picking the best examples. And that way you can just practice low stress using that and adapting it to the question. And as you go through time, obviously you'll need to look at that less and less. Hopefully you do enough practice papers that it'll be almost completely in your head. Then send your practices to be checked. You can send it to a teacher or a peer or a tutor. When you get that feedback, apply it to the essay scaffold rather than to the specific example that you did. So what a lot of students get caught up doing is just perfecting that one essay, but you're not going to be asked that question in the exam. So apply that feedback to the scaffold, and that way you're making changes that will positively improve the next practices you do. Keep improving your essay in this way and keep practicing until you're super familiar with it. Do this and you should be very prepared for your exam. So this essay scaffold was the technique I used to kind of hack memorization in the HSC exams. Let me know if you have any other techniques, and I hope this helped.